Sure. Thank you.
I'm wearing a few different hats. I'm playing technology person and so if you're able, can you all spotlight our Temple Beth Shalom feed? Because you then should see me on camera in just a moment.
Hi, Cassidy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Do you want to pause the recording until we're ready to start the program?
Yeah, I was just looking at how to, there it is.
Rabbi?
Give me 1 second.
Sure. Thank you.
I'm wearing a few different hats. I'm playing technology person and so if you're able, can you all spotlight our Temple Beth Shalom feed? Because you then should see me on camera in just a moment. Let me do something different with that because they're circle. And here we are gathered on this evening to have a chance to learn about community. And I just start with simple words from the book of Psalms. How truly good and pleasant it is that we have this opportunity to gather, to hear about each other, to hear from each other, to be various communities weaving our tapestry, the fabric of our communities together, so that we can create something that is real shalom, of real wholeness and harmony and peace as we come together this evening. And so it is wonderful that our congregation here at Temple Beth Shalom in Vero Beach is able to get together with the Federation of those North County communities. I certainly have Gainesville in my heart because it is great to be a Florida Gator. And it is wonderful that we have the opportunity to learn with and from Tracy this evening. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us and giving this opportunity to learn together.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cassidy from the JCNCF. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to thank our sponsors, along with the JCNCF and Keshet. We have Greg Hendershite and Temple Beth Shalom of Vero Beach. Tracy is Keshet's Florida Education and Training Manager. She has a master's in English education from Teachers College at Columbia University. She started her career as a high school English teacher and then spent the last decade facilitating anti-bias and diversity awareness workshops for the ADL. She joined the team at Keshet in 2021 and is proud to share that she is a member of the Wexner Heritage Program 2023 cohort. And I will let her tell you a little bit more about her life and give her presentation after that. I'll be monitoring the chat. If you have any questions for her during her presentation, feel free to take yourself off of mute and ask a question. If you feel more comfortable typing it into chat, I'll be monitoring that, so I'll see any questions that you have. And with that, I will turn it over to Tracy.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Bernholtz. Thank you so much, Cassidy and the JCNCF. It is wonderful to see some familiar faces and also to see some new faces as well. I'm very excited. I am going to share my screen so that you can see the slides. And just a few pieces of housekeeping before we get started. I wanted to let you know that tomorrow morning, I will be sending JCNCF a PDF of the slide deck, along with any resources that come up in the course of our conversation tonight that I think you might find helpful, and an evaluation, a link to an evaluation form. So you will get all of those things tomorrow. Hopefully, Cassie will also include my contact information. And so if you are like me, somebody who thinks of your question many hours after the moment when you were, had the opportunity to ask, then you are welcome to reach out to me. I have a pretty big slide deck tonight. We only have an hour. So if we don't get through all the slides, that's fine. We will, you will get a copy of the deck and you have the ability to follow with me later. It's really more important to me that everything we discuss makes sense, it's relevant, and that you have the opportunity to ask any questions that you have, or even to offer any pushback that you might like. So really, Cassidy's offering of you to come off mute and interrupt is absolutely endorsed by me. I really hope that you will engage with the material as much as needed to make sure that you understand everything. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I just want to name, it's been a really hard couple of weeks for me. I imagine for many of you as well. We thought about whether or not to continue with the program tonight, and we decided that we should. Learning and education and getting to understand the other and having a deep appreciation for the humanity in all of us is very important to us. And so we're glad you're here. And we know that, there's a lot of other things going on right now. So thank you. I work for Keshet. Keshet is the Hebrew word for rainbow. We are a national nonprofit that work for the full equality of LGBTQ Jews and their family members in Jewish life. And we do that programming in a variety of different ways. We have a community mobilization department that works to mobilize communities in favor or against legislation that impacts our community. We have a youth programs team that work with youth ages 13 to 24 with virtual and in-person programming. I will share the link for that in case you know somebody who might benefit from that programming. And then my team, the education and training team, we work with Jewish organizations and communities to help them improve their programming policy and culture so that all LGBTQ Jews and their family members who walk through their door feel a sense of belonging. And I cover the state of Florida, so I get the whole state. So I travel quite a bit, as you can imagine, but I also love these opportunities when we can gather virtually. Okay, there you go. So we have 3 goals for our training tonight. We want to make some connections between LGBTQ plus equality and Jewish values. We want to understand and use some core terms and concepts related to LGBTQ identities and learn how to be an LGBTQ plus ally. And for just to set some common notes, some intentions for our time together tonight. Some of you may be able to facilitate this material far better than I. Some of you may be very new to this vocabulary and language, but I believe that when we come together in space and we have a growth and learning mindset, we can always learn something new from one another. Take space, make space. I invited you all to come off mute and use the chat and really engage with the material, but please also notice if your voice is taking up a lot of space that you leave room for others to also participate. Trust, intent, and tend impact. When we're learning about identities and we're talking about using new language and talking about new concepts, sometimes things come out of our mouth and they don't really sound the way they were supposed to. We are going to assume that you had the best intentions possible. And if you do say something that you feel might have hurt somebody, we offer you the opportunity just to say you are sorry. Prepare for non-closure. We are not going to be able to understand all the things in 1 hour, but I'm just so glad that you're here to start the journey or continue the journey. And then hopefully, I hope we can have some fun together. I know that it's not been really fun the last couple of weeks. So maybe just by being in community tonight, we can bring a smile to each other's faces. Can we all agree to abide by these intentions? You can nod your head or put the thumb mark in the Zoom screen. I would really thank you so much. So the why. Why do we do this? Oh, Deanna, you want to ask a question? Go for it. Or you're acknowledging the intentions? All right, well, I'm going to encourage you to interrupt me if you had a question. I'm going to assume that you are acknowledging and agreeing to the intentions.
Yeah, I was acknowledging. Sorry about that.
All good, Deanna, all good.
All right.
So when I was a little girl, I grew up in a really small town outside of Boston. There was no internet, and there were no out Jews in my world. And I didn't know that you could be Jewish and gay. I just didn't think that was something that was possible. And I really thought I would have to pick. And my Judaism was familial. It was safe. It was tangible. I love being Jewish. And so I hid that part of me that I thought I couldn't have, so that I could really lean into and be at home in my Jewish community. And our youth today, or really anyone, right? They all have these magic rectangles that they walk around with, and they can find community anywhere in the world at any time of day, no matter what. And so I do this work, because I can't believe somebody invented like my dream job, but mostly because I want to provide representation and visibility so that other LGBTQ Jews know that they can be their full selves, they can be loved and accepted by their community, they can, aspire to be whatever they want when they grow up, and they can really have a home in our community. And also because our Jewish values tell us that this is holy work. So the bottom Jewish value, Kol Yisrael Aravim Ze Bazeh, right? Kol Yisrael, meaning all Israel, all Jews, all Jewishly adjacent, all people who love Jews, right? Aravim is the Hebrew word for guarantor. Ze Bazeh, one for the other. So we are instructed to guarantee one for the other. It's like when you take out a loan at a bank and you need somebody who's willing to sign the paperwork to say they will take care of you when you need it or if you need it. That is what we are instructed to do, one for the other. And then the middle Jewish value, B'Tselem Elohim, is this idea that we are all created in the image of God. And if there is one God creating all of these people, you would think that we would all turn out the same. And yet we don't. We all are different from one another. We all have our own thoughts and hopes and dreams and fears. And yet there is a piece of God, of that divinity within each of us. And so I think what makes us really divine and special is the things that make us different, that make us unique. And then lastly, if you don't agree with or understand anything that I talk about tonight, I do hope you can lean into the Jewish value of kavod, or respect, that we're just going to, even if we don't understand or we don't agree, we still know that as fellow human beings, we need to respect each other. The next section of the training, my slides are a little slow in transferring tonight. I apologize. Technology is a thing. I'm going to kind of rush through the current landscape. We all know it's not a really easy time to be an LGBTQ person in Florida. I do want to talk about it for a quick minute. And then we're going to move into some terms and concepts related to LGBTQ plus identity. We're going to talk a little bit about pronouns and why they're important. And at the end, we will talk about allyship. So that's sort of the agenda for this evening. So there has been over 501 anti-transgender bills introduced, or anti-LGBTQ bills introduced across the country in 2023. These are some statistics from the Trevor Project, which is a national nonprofit that does research and collects data on the mental health of LGBTQ people. This is a secular organization. So these statistics are secular. They are not based on the Jewish population. You don't have to read the slide. I'm going to highlight 3 quick points. One is that the anti-transgender legislation, 93% of transgender and non-binary youth say that they are worried about being denied access to gender-affirming medical care. 91% of transgender and non-binary youth say they're worried about accessing the bathroom. And 83% of transgender and non-binary youth are worried about being able to play sports. So medical care, athletics, and the bathroom, these are basic needs of individuals. These are not things that people should have to be worrying about their ability to access. You can see the numbers are really high here. Suicide risk goes up. Anxiety and depression rates go up as well. These numbers are specific to Florida. When people feel other, when they are made not to feel that they belong. And so I like to follow those 2 slides up with this important point, that LGBTQ youth and adults are not inherently prone to mental health challenges or suicide risk because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. Rather, they are placed at higher risk because of how they are mistreated and stigmatized in society. And our Talmud teaches us, one who saves a life is as if they have saved the world entire. So we know from our oldest teachings that it is life-saving, that we need to do what we can to save lives. And when my slide changes, there we go. LGBTQ youth who report having at least one accepting adult were 40% less likely to report a suicide attempt in the past year. So I truly believe that you are engaging tonight in life-saving work, and I'm so grateful that you came to this discussion. So this is the vocabulary portion of the evening. I promise you I will not give you a vocabulary quiz when it's over, but I do think it is important for us to learn some of the terms related to these identities. And before we dive into those those facets of identity, I want to name that we are all multifaceted. There are lots and lots of parts of us that make us who we are. And the way those parts of our identity intersect inform the way that we see the world and the way that the world sees us. And because we only have a short time together tonight, we're going to focus just on 3 parts of our identity: sex assigned at birth, gender identity, and sexual orientation. So sex assigned at birth is what happens when a doctor or a nurse or a technician, somebody outside of the baby's body, looks at that baby and assigns them male or female based on their genitalia or their reproductive organs, whatever you can see from the outside of that baby's body. Sometimes it happens at birth, sometimes it happens at a sonogram appointment before birth, but it is something that is done by somebody outside of the body of that baby, assigning them a sex. About 1.5% of the time, people are assigned intersex. There is no one way to be intersex. It shows up in a whole variety of ways, but it is when a human being is born with some kind of combination of reproductive organs or genitalia that we would consider traditionally male or traditionally female. And sometimes that shows up at birth, so it can be sex assigned at birth, intersex, and then sometimes it actually doesn't show up until puberty, in which case that person would have been assigned a sex at birth that people assume that they were, but they find out later that that is actually not their sex assigned at birth. And like I said, this happens about 1.5% of the time. For me, I'm not a numbers person. So for me to get a sense of what 1.5% of the time means, Jews are 2.4% of the United States population. So it's less than 1 percentage point different, if that helps you at all. I find that sometimes it does. So I want to talk about the binary for a minute, and then we'll get back to our triangles. Binary is a Latin word that means two, and it is the idea that systems are created for two things, right? Yes and no. They can be mutually opposite. They can be mutually exclusive or opposite, but this idea that everything kind of fits neatly into two categories. So this is one moment where I'm going to invite you to come off mute if you're comfortable with that, and we're going to play a little game. So if I were to say up, you would say
down.
Down. Amazing. And if I were to say hot, you would say
Cold.
And if I were to say cat person, you would say
Dog. Person.
And if I were to say boy, you would say
Girl.
You all get 100% on the quiz. Thank you so much. You can go back on mute. And I would like to argue that cats and dogs are actually not opposites of each other. They are both four-legged house pets with tails and fur, and yet you knew that was the right answer because you've been told all your life you're either a cat person or a dog person. Water or tea or soup or coffee is not just hot or cold, right? It can be lukewarm. There's a whole gradient between hot and cold. And so I want to remind us that even though we have these categories that we've been taught our whole lives to think of, that there's a whole range of experiences that fall outside of those categories. And so I would argue that as humans, we're so complex and nuanced that to imagine that every single human being could fall into a binary category of man or woman is very limiting on the human experience. So I'm gonna ask one more question. Some of you who have been in my presentations before are not allowed to answer this, but anyone else is welcome to either come off mute or put in the chat. What is my favorite food?
Ice cream. Oh, your favorite food?
My favorite food.
How would I know?
Thank you, Joanne. How would you know? Anyone else want to try to guess? And no one is guessing.
There's no way to guess that. We don't know you.
Right.
You don't know me. There is no way to guess that. See, you all already passed this conversation with flying colors. So I'm going to go back to our triangles, and I want to talk about gender identity a little bit. Gender identity is an internal sense of self. It is who we know ourselves to be. My favorite food, and I'm going to make a connection. I promise I'm bringing this back. My favorite food is eggplant parmesan. If I told you that my favorite food was eggplant parmesan, would you believe me?
Sure. Why not?
Nori's saying no. Nori, you don't trust me. Right? If I tell you my favorite food, you have no real reason to doubt me, right? There's no reason I would make that up. I love eggplant. Anything with melted cheese makes it that much better of a food. Red sauce does not make my stomach upset. I know some people, it can give them some acid, right? Eggplant parm to me is like the perfect food. And I know that because I'm the one who's living inside my body. I know the way the food tastes in my mouth. I know the way it feels in my stomach when I digest it. I know how I feel when I eat it. I know when I think about when I crave something to eat. I know that sometimes I crave that. I'm the one living with me, with all of my thoughts and all of my feelings and all of my fears and all of my everything, right? I'm the one who gets to listen to my thoughts late at night. And so I really, really want us to think about gender identity similarly. I know favorite food is a little bit trivial, but really someone's gender identity is how they understand themselves to be. And if they share their gender identity with you, we need to trust them in the same way that we would trust somebody who tells us their favorite food or any more confidential or, important information to them, because they are the one living inside their body. And they've probably waited a really long time thinking very, very hard about it before they share that information with you. And if they do, that means they trust you. And so a good mazel is a really helpful thing to say. And then thank you for trusting me. I want us to think, I want us to divorce the idea or separate the idea of like biology and body parts from gender identity, right? They're not connected. They are two different facets of who we are. So as you can see on this triangle, we have sex assigned at birth. That's the top of the triangle. That's about, biology and body parts. But gender identity is on a different axis of the triangle because that's a different part of who we are. That's how we understand or know ourselves to be. Are there questions so far? I see that there's comments in the chat.
What does gender queer mean?
Okay, thank you so much, Joanne. I was just going to go there, but I wanted to ask if there were other questions, but I will go there right now. Hold on. The more questions you all ask, the more water I get to drink. So please ask lots of questions. The word queer is actually the only word that's going to show up on both of the bottom axes of the triangle. There's no other word that shows up in more than one place on this screen. And it's a word with a very long history. So queer used to be a derogatory term. There are some people who, when they hear that term, they still recoil a bit because they remember when that word was used as an insult. It's been reclaimed. Yeah, it's real. It's been reclaimed. It's a word that a lot of people, particularly the youth, really like to use. If you haven't noticed, speak very quickly, and professionally, I have to say LGBTQ plus like 1,000 times a day. So I find queer to be a great word because it's just easier to say. But there's a variety of reasons why people might like it. I know I haven't defined it yet. It is an umbrella term. It holds all the parts of LGBT identity, right? Mm-hmm. It can really think of it as expansive, like the catch-all. Anyone who identifies it's any part of the LGBTIA community. And if you're not familiar with all those letters, I'll go over them in a second. is also welcome, invited, or frequently will use the word queer. So it can be queer about somebody's gender, or it could be queer about somebody's sexual orientation. And again, to further define it, because I've sort of talked around the edges, it's really sort of what we might think of as cisgender, which I will define in a second, and non-straight, right? So anyone who holds any of the parts of LGBTIA, so the L being lesbian, B being bisexual, G being gay, T being transgender, I would be intersex, and then A would be asexual. So anybody who holds any of those identities might oftentimes refer to themselves as queer instead. And if they're gender queer, then they're queer in relationship to their gender. Somebody who is gender fluid is somebody whose gender sort of changes over time. They are not always a man or always a woman or always non-binary, right? They might experience a lot of fluctuation in their expression or their understanding or their experience of their gender. And somebody who is non-binary, somebody who falls outside of that binary gender that we talked about on the previous slide, man or woman, somebody who experiences their gender outside of man or woman. And I think that this can be, if you are somebody who has always experienced your gender in alignment with your sex assigned at birth, this can make no sense. It can be very, very hard to grasp. And in a sense, you're very lucky because the world was designed, our society has been designed for people whose gender identity is in alignment with their sex assigned at birth. But that's not the case for everybody. There are lots and lots of people who do not experience that correlation between their sex assigned at birth and their gender identity. So even if it is a little bit confusing to you or doesn't really make a ton of sense, knowing and respecting that that's an experience others are feeling is important. And so like if you think eggplant parmesan is the worst food ever, you can know or understand that I might really enjoy that, and we don't have to understand that together. Linda.
Thanks. Yeah, I was wondering when you talk about sex assigned at birth, and at some point that person just realizes, no, that was wrong. And I was just wondering if there are any good data on what percentage of sex assigned at births are wrong in the United States, in the world, whatever.
Yeah, the data is hard for a variety of reasons. Mostly data is not collected until people are older, like 18 and over. And so there's not a lot of very accurate data for younger people. And there's also underreporting for people who are not comfortable or safe to be out. So I will tell you that some of the data that we get now is that 25% of youth are identifying as some part of LGBTQ. The number is much smaller for trans and non-binary folks, somewhere between like 7 and 12%, but it's not exact. The question I actually thought you were about to ask me was, at what age do people know? And people can understand their gender identity as early as 18 months. Some people realize much, much later, depending on their access to information, the representation and visibility they have, the safety that they're experiencing in their communities, all of those things. But yeah, the data is still, it's hard to collect, although there are a number of organizations that are trying to do it. Erin in the Morning is a website, erininthe.com or org, I forget, is a really great resource for some of that kind of information. And I'll send links in the follow-up email tomorrow, places where you can start to look at some of the data and understand how they gather it. Marcia.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Tracy.
Marcia.
Tracy and I are friends. Just a background. So I'm the spiritual leader of the only LGBTQ founded synagogue in the state, only one of 6 in the country. And so 97% of my congregants identify as LGBTQIA+ or somewhere on the spectrum. But because most of our members are older men. I was just texting Lois, who's here too, to ask this question. The term queer doesn't typically come up. The only member that I know that uses genderqueer in her gender identity is Gabby. You've met Gabby, and she's open about it and out. But I don't understand. I need you to kind of help me understand. Gabby presents as female. She doesn't present as non-binary. And that's the part that I always get confused about. She uses she, her, they pronouns, but that's the part that confuses me. And because I've been in this job for more than a year, I have a lot more knowledge than I used to, but I still get confused between the gender fluid and gender queer individuals who still present as one gender identity. So I would really appreciate that explanation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So that is exactly where we were going next. I am going to tap my screen and hopefully we get the, yep, there we go. So 2 things I want to say. I'm going to use this, my favorite food, eggplant, Parmesan, and algae, like all night, because I think it's really useful. If you look at me, you cannot know my favorite food because you just can't. Likewise, if you look at somebody, you cannot know their gender identity. You just can't. And the reason is that not everybody, so there's like 17 reasons. I'm trying to decide what order. Let me go with the 2 words on the screen first, and then I'll explain the reasons. So the 2 new words I put on the screen are cisgender and transgender. Cis is a Latin prefix that means on the same side. So if your sex assigned at birth is in alignment with your gender identity, then you would be cisgender. I am cisgender. My sex assigned at birth is in alignment with my gender identity. Trans is a Latin prefix that means across. If your sex assigned at birth is not in alignment with your gender identity, you would be transgender. Transgender does not mean surgery. It doesn't mean hormones, and it doesn't mean presentation. It just means that your internal sense of self, your gender identity, does not correlate or match with your sex assigned at birth. Some people who identify as transgender very much want to, what we call pass. They don't want anyone to know that they're transgender, and they create an appearance so that it is very hard to tell. Other people, they don't really care if they pass or not. They are just very happy knowing, identifying their gender. And then there are some people for whom there's just no relationship between their gender identity and their presentation. I know a lot of non-binary folks or genderqueer people who really understand that while they might present more feminine or more masculine, that their gender is a much deeper and different experience than what's related to what we call expression. So gender expression is how we express ourselves. I always have on, Nori can vouch for me, I always have on big earrings, right? That's like my favorite, that's my gender expression. I really love earrings, right? But that doesn't have anything to do with my gender identity. That's just how I express myself. And so different people will choose to express themselves in ways that are comfortable for them, but it doesn't have to align with gender identity, which is why this can be really confusing and complicated, because we really were like taught in a world where, like, you know, if you are a man, you dress this way, you do those household chores, you have that aspiration for a profession. And if you're a woman, you do these after school activities, and you enjoy these kinds of things to do, and we're kind of breaking that down. We're kind of allowing opportunity for everyone to just be themselves. And if you're sex assigned at birth as a woman and you or female and you identify as a woman and you love pink and you want to be a teacher and your favorite thing to wear is high heels, like, lean into it, do you, and also know that that's not true for everyone. And so we just are trying very hard to lean into this idea of B'Tselem Elohim, like we're all created in the divine image, and each of us are going to express that in a different way. Such good questions. Do we have any other questions? I need to drink, so somebody has to ask me something.
I have a question, Tracy,
Oh yeah,
about about intersex. I have a friend who found out through doing 24andMe that she's intersex. She has an extra chromosome. Under the cisgender and transgender, because you said it relates back to your sex assigned at birth, what is her sex assigned at birth? Intersex.
Yes. So I have a colleague who is one of 6 children. My colleague and one of my colleague's siblings were both born intersex. Neither one of them understood until they went through puberty. My colleague said, I am non-binary. That is how I understand my identity. I have hormones and body parts of both sex assigned at birth, and I'm non-binary is where I'm comfortable being. My colleague's sibling thought that she was assigned female at birth, very much identifies as a female, and was like, I am a woman. And so intersex is an unusual space where it can really depend on that individual. And I think it also can depend on that individual's understanding of who they are, and also of the vast variety of ways people can show up intersex. So
thank you.
No problem.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
With utmost respect for all of the different classifications, when this is presented to our younger children, isn't it enormously confusing? I understand respect, and they should all be taught the certain, your eggplant parmesan, and I like sushi, that type of thing. But isn't there an element of real confusion that our school-age children experience by everything being so, pardon the expression, fluid? I'm not really positive how helpful it is. I have a gay son who, went through his angst when he was going through puberty. Clearly a gay man, he's married, all good things. But I worry about some of our children getting very mixed up by hearing all of this and having so much coming at them. How do we help them?
That is such an excellent question. I'm so grateful that you asked it. Thank you. So I actually do a lot of work in preschool classrooms because developmentally, child development people will tell you that children understand and recognize different genders between 18 months and 3 years of age.
Right.
And by 4, they have a very strong sense, or they can, because everything's sort of on a continuum, like puberty, we all go through it at different times. But they can have an understanding of their gender that young. And if you think about a preschool classroom where kids are often told to line up the girls' line and the boys' line, or they read picture books that show, only boys and girls, or they are taught that only girls can wear dresses or dress up as princesses, or, dress up as Esther for Purim, or all the ways, even like the sports that they're often signed up for. Like, we're not signing up all of our boys for gymnastics and all of our little girls for football. Like, at a very, very young age, kids are sort of delineated into the gender, the gender that their families or their community or their society sort of expects them to. And for the kids who that is the right thing and makes sense, that's very validating and really wonderful. But for the kids for whom it doesn't, they are left without any sense of, who am I? I don't see myself anywhere. So we're not going in and working with the preschool kids. I don't do that at all. I go in and talk to preschool educators about, instead of calling your kids boys and girls, can you say scientists or artists or learners, or, the Hebrew word chavarim, friends? Can we show some books that have non-binary characters in them, or people who use they, them pronouns, just to get a little bit of representation? Just like when I was a little girl, if there had been, a gay couple or a lesbian, in my congregation, and I knew that was available to me, how much better, easier it would have been for me to understand I'm not alone. And so we don't want to tell kids, you need to do this or you need to be like that, but we just want to offer them some opportunity to see all of the different ways that people can show up, so that they feel seen and they feel heard and they feel respected. So I'm so glad you asked that. I am not telling you not to ask questions because these are some really good questions, but I am going to just talk about sexual orientation for a minute to move us to the next section in case people have questions there. Sexual orientation is whether, how, and to whom. Whether, how, and to whom we experience physical or romantic attraction. And I do think that's important because in our matchmaking culture, we often don't talk about people who are asexual or aromantic, and that are people who don't experience sexual or don't experience romantic attraction. You can have one or the other, you can have both, but that is a real sexual orientation, and it's one we don't talk about very often. Oh, what did I just do? I passed the slide. My thing is very finicky tonight. I apologize. And there, no, we went really far. Okay. Some of the other words you can see on this sexual orientation axis of the triangle is pansexual, which I usually get a lot of questions about. As we talked about earlier, bi is a Latin prefix that means two. So bisexual was typically somebody who was attracted to men and women. As we began to think about gender more expansively than men and women, we needed a word for people who are attracted to multiple genders. So pan is a Latin prefix that means all or many. So is omni. So sometimes you'll hear the words pansexual or omnisexual for people who are attracted to all genders. Queer, we identified, it's somebody who is not cisgender or straight. And then I believe the other terms are probably ones that you have heard before. So we have covered most of this already. So I'm just going to go to this slide, which is the reason I said at the beginning that we were not going to have a vocabulary quiz, is because while these words all have dictionary definitions, they are very fluid in the way people use them. Yes, I'll call you in 1 second. I just want to finish this one thought. Different people are going to like to use different terms. And so being familiar with what they are is really important, but memorizing definitions is not, because just making sure that the people in our lives who we care about, that we're using the terms that they would like us to use, that is the important thing. So Dorothy, thank you so much for your patience. Please ask your question.
I wanted to go back to where you were talking about being inclusive with in the preschool, talking about all different genders and how people identify themselves. How do we possibly do that now in the state of Florida with our wonderful governor, who has put a kibosh on reading books that present all kinds of families? We can't even read a storybook about alternative families, two moms, two dads. We're not allowed to do that. Teachers can get in trouble. So it all sounds wonderful, and that's what we've all done as teachers previous to this last whole debacle. So you tell me this is all wonderful, but to me it's sounding more pie in the sky right now, because we can't really do that.
Oh, Dorothy, thank you so much for that comment. You are speaking on a Zoom as being hosted by multiple 501c3s, but I will just say that we can do this in our Jewish spaces. And this is why I do this work. This is why I spend every day working with Jewish organizations across the state to make sure that all Jews who walk through the doors of our Jewish organizations feel a sense of belonging. Because when you can't feel a sense of belonging in your public institutions, when your public institutions are actively trying to erase your identity, it is imperative that you have a spiritual home that you can go to where you can feel safe and seen and respected and loved. And that is why there are 3 or 4, there's 3 Jewish organizations and a sponsor tonight who felt really important about this work. Keshet is growing. The nonprofit I work for, we are growing rapidly because there's been a lot of understanding that we really need to move this work along in our private sector. And so
I think that's great. I'm sad for all the children in the public school when your parents have to sign a form that says, you can call my daughter Izzy, even though it's not her given name, Isabel. It's the greater world.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's really hard. I mean, last night I was at a school board meeting to make sure that I was advocating for the policies that I wanted to see in place. It is really hard. It is. And I do this work in hopes that you will then go and tell everyone you know about why these are Jewish values and why these issues matter and why they should vote in a way that will uphold the dignity of all human beings. So I just really appreciate your comment. Thank you. I'm going to move us into a little bit of a conversation about language. Our proverbs tell us that death and life are in the power of the tongue. And that when we speak, right, we are affecting the people around us. And so even when we are intending to be very kind and very polite, sometimes we can still be exclusive. And so it's just to think about all the ways that we use gender in our language. When we welcome ladies and gentlemen, or boys and girls, or ma'am and sir, we've been taught that those are very polite terms, and they can be very polite terms. And also, I want us to think about moving away from binary gender terms and using things like friends or everyone or all. I've leaned really hard in saying folks. I know not everybody really likes that. I like the way it sounds. But just a thought to move away from gendered language. So if actually, maybe I didn't do this. I generally start out every presentation by saying, hi, my name is Tracy Labgold and my pronouns are she, her. And I don't think I did that tonight because I was just excited about Cassidy's warm introduction of me. But I always do that because I want to model how to be a really good ally. My gender identity, as we've discussed, is woman. I present as a woman. If you were to guess my gender identity, you would likely guess it correctly. Even though I told you we can't know, it's still oftentimes, some people are very easy to guess. And so if I can share my pronouns, which I do in my Zoom screen and in my introduction and in my email signature and on my work name tag and on my business card and I don't know, lots of places, I am sending a message to others that it is okay to share pronouns. And if your pronouns are not as regularly respected as mine are, then I'm telling you that I'm going to be an ally. I'm giving you a safe place. And we never, ever, ever want to mandate sharing of pronouns. We just want to offer that as an opportunity because we don't ever want anyone to misgender themselves, which is to tell us the gender that they are not. Or to out themselves if they're not ready to tell us who they are. And so pronouns, just in case you don't remember, are the little words that we use to talk about people when we're talking about them in the third person and we don't want to use their names. So there are examples in the last column, right? My pronouns are she, her. So you would say that challah is hers, right? If your pronouns are he, him, you might say he created the recipe himself. There are a lot of people now who are using they, them pronouns, people who identify as gender nonconforming or non-binary or genderqueer, and they feel that they, them is the set of pronouns that really describe who they are. I, too, was a former English teacher, and as a former English teacher, I want to give you lots and lots of permission to use they, them singularly. If we were actually meeting in person tonight and we were sitting in a conference room at a synagogue or a JCC, and at the end of the night, somebody left their cell phone on the table, I would look at that cell phone and I would say, somebody left their cell phone. I wonder whose it is. Maybe they are looking for their cell phone. We should call them to make sure they can come back and pick up their cell phone before they get too far away from the JCC. Right? So we are actually using they and them pronouns singularly a lot more often than we sometimes realize. And then the two sets of pronouns at the bottom of the page are what are called neopronouns. They are pronouns that were created for people who don't like they, them. They're not used quite as commonly, but I wanted you to know about them just in case you ever happen to come across them. Mistakes are going to happen. We are human beings. We are not perfect. We do the best we can. And yet sometimes we make mistakes. And so if we do, we say we're sorry and we fix the pronoun and we just keep going. If you make the mistake a lot, then maybe don't say I'm sorry anymore. Just fix it and move on. But the best way to get really good at somebody's pronouns is to practice when we're not around. You can have a whole conversation about somebody that you care about or somebody that you know or the neighbor with another person to practice so that when you are around them, you don't make any mistakes or you make fewer mistakes. Because like we said in that Proverbs quote, right? Life and death are in the power of a tongue. And when you speak, we really want to make sure that we are affirming and caring for people that we care about. Questions about pronouns? So I wanted to do a little bit on allyship before we conclude for the evening. So we polled some trans and non-binary kiddos. These are the answers that we received from them. We asked them, what did your family do well? And a lot of the kiddos talked about how they appreciated when their families corrected when their family members corrected other family members. So we're now in the stretch of time where we don't have a Jewish holiday for the whole month of Heshvan, but we will have them coming up. So Hanukkah is not too far away. I don't know how that's possible, but if we're going to gather together to make latkes and light the menorah, right? It's helpful if somebody in the family can remind other members of the family to use this name or this pronoun for anyone in the family who may have changed. To gently remind people, all of the things to just make sure that we're setting us up for success. If you have a family member who identifies as LGBTQ and you've been sort of like nervous about what to say to them or how to ask them, I think that the kids are telling us they're totally fine talking about it. It's actually less confusing and strange for the young ones than it is for some of us who are a little bit more stuck in our ways. And they want to tell us, they want to share, as long as they feel that what they're telling or what they're sharing is being received without judgment, without doubt, without too many opinions. It can be hard to do it, but so the kids were saying, ask them what pronouns they want you to use. Ask them, if it's okay for you to talk to your friends about it. Who knows? Do other family members know? Find out so that you're not sharing private information with your loved one without their permission. And also ask them, if you have somebody who's changed gender identity or pronouns, ask them how they want to be referred to when you talk about things that they did when they were younger. Some people will say, oh, it's okay. If it happened when I was still identifying as she, her, then you can use she, her. And some people will say, no, please refer to me as the pronouns or name that I currently use. And that's going to be very personal and very different for everyone. I have a friend who has a trans child, and that child asked my friend to take down every photograph in the house of the child before the child transitioned. However, my friend wears a necklace that has the children's names on it that was the original name, not the new name. And the necklace is very sentimental. And the kid said, my friend's kid said to my friend, Mom, it's okay if you still wear the necklace, because I know the necklace is sentimental. I don't mind the necklace, but I don't want to see the pictures on the wall. And so every kid, every person is going to have a little bit of a different opinion or feeling about how they want you to reference or refer to them, and what is comfortable and what's not. And so being able to say, would you like me to take these pictures down? Or what would make you feel safer or more seen? Or how can I help and be supportive? Those are the kinds of questions that are really helpful. That also will relate to nicknames. If you always called them, beautiful or bunny, or I don't know, whatever other cute, endearing nickname you had, maybe they still want you to refer to them that way, and maybe they don't. And then I'm going to skip that slide because we are running very short on time. Just a couple of things that the kids said that they wish their family had done better. They wish that their grandparents would have respected them instead of saying it was a phase. They wish that their grandparents would try a little harder to get their pronouns correct. They wish that their family members would not use the name that they don't use anymore, or insist on appropriate clothing. Clothing can be very loaded for some people, especially around getting dressed up for the high holidays or the, any synagogue attendance. Some kids were saying that they really don't like when you use gender specific adjectives like pretty or handsome. And some were saying that they really didn't like, somebody in the family bought them like jewelry when really what they wanted was a lightsaber, that they wish the gifts were not so gendered. Cha-Cha, you have a question? Okay, well, if you do, you are welcome to ask it. And then not using gender stereotypes, I think is really important. And we can think about all the places where they come up, because they come up in a lot of places we don't even realize. But if we start to pay attention to our language, we can take those out. I just wanted to say one last thing before we conclude, and that is why Jewish voices matter in the fight for LGBTQ rights. In more than half the country, it is still legal to discriminate against LGBTQ plus people. And religion or religious freedom are often used as an argument against LGBTQ rights. And so as Jews, we support LGBTQ protections because they are part of our religious values. Marcia, you want to ask your question? I'm going to stop my share so we can see each other.
Cha-Cha she was asking about dead naming and wanted you to explain dead naming, but I don't know that you saw her in the text in the chat.
Oh, thank you so much, Cha-Cha. Thank you for that awesome question. A dead name is a word we use to refer to the name somebody used before they had a name change. And so if we use that name, that is considered the act of dead naming. Sometimes people think of their previous identity as being dead. That's a little bit too severe of a thought process for others. But the term dead naming just means using somebody's name before they changed it. And most often that is something people really do not want you to do. Always important to check in with people. I know a lot of times we shy away from asking the tough questions, but I really believe that when you are coming to a person who you love and care about, and you say, I want to do right by you. I love you so much. I want to get it right. Please tell me, what are the pronouns you'd like me to use? What is the name you want me to use? How do you want me to refer to you when we talk about times in the past? Asking those kind of questions shows your strong desire to get it right and to affirm their identity and to support them. And so it is okay to ask those questions when you do it with a lot of love. And it is much better to ask and to hear from the person than to go ahead and use the old name and possibly offend or hurt them. So thank you so much, Marcia and Cha-Cha, for that question. Susan.
I could feel something in me when you were talking about the pictures, like pictures on the wall. And I have compassion for parents who had a whole life with their child and they want to be respectful in the here and now, but it's also like cutting off an arm for the parents to make that disappear. That's asking a lot on the parents.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. And another reason why it's really hard on the parents is because oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, when a kid comes to their parents and announces that their gender identity is different than the parents understand it to be, that child, maybe not if the child transitions at like 2 years old, which happens, but if a child transitions older, at 9 or 13 or 17 or something like this, that child has probably spent a very long time thinking this through and processing it. But if they didn't share this journey with their parents along the way, and they just sort of dump it on their parents one night over dinner, right? The parent all of a sudden needs to absorb this information that child has spent all this time thinking about. The child has gotten to a place where they're ready to talk about it, but the parent is just at the very beginning of that journey. And so there needs to be a process of figuring it out together and supporting each other. And we need to talk about that and name it out loud so that the child can understand. And yes, I can see why you might not want to take down the pictures of that family vacation or that holiday that were really important and meaningful, or that simcha that you all celebrated together, right? And sort of beginning to understand what feels safe for everyone. Maybe there's a place in your closet where you can have some pictures that you care about, or maybe there's, a spot in the basement where the child doesn't spend. We don't have basements in Florida. You can tell I didn't grow up here. But like, how can we think of creative ways that we can support all the members of the family so that everyone feels loved? So thank you so much, Susan, for bringing that up. We are slightly over time. I'm willing to take one or two more questions if anyone has them. Otherwise, I really am so appreciative of all of you for coming this evening, for asking good questions. It's been really wonderful.
Tracy, thank you so much. And thanks again to Temple Beth Shalom and to Greg Hendershite for helping us put this on. And Tracy, you've been wonderful. I think this has been really informative, and I'm really glad we could do this.
Thank you so much. Lila Tov, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
Lila Tov.
Tracy, next time you come over, I will take you out for that eggplant parmesan at that amazing restaurant on the drive.
Thank you.
It's really good. Good night, everybody.
Tracy, I want you to know I just changed my my name on the
I
thing,
see
and I
it.
added my pronouns. So see, you had a big
Thank you so
impact.
much, Linda. Thank you.
It was great.
Thank you.